Protests against Myanmar's military coup intensified, and it's triggered a national reckoning on the persecution of Rohingya Muslims. Some figures are even apologizing. But will this outpouring of sympathy lead to justice for the Rohingya? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. The coup in Myanmar appears to have united almost everyone against the military. Protesters continue to defy threats of violent crackdowns to demand the release of Aung San Suu Kyi and other democratically elected leaders. Rallies across the nation have attracted people from all walks of life. And they're not only demanding a return to democracy. Many are questioning the army's persecution of ethnic minorities. Some say they were told lies or simply didn't know about the army's crackdown against the mainly Muslim Rohingya. The former UN Special Rapporteur on Myanmar was vilified for highlighting the atrocities. When Yang Lee tweeted a call for Aung San Suu Kyi to be released, some people apologized for ignoring her warnings in the past. Some Rohingya refugees have been showing solidarity with the pro-democracy protesters. They've posted videos on social media showing them banging pots and pans. They're also using a three-finger salute, another symbol of the pro-democracy campaign. Myanmar's military is accused of rights abuses against the Rohingya, and many don't want to return, especially now that the army is again running the country. The coup leaders have said they will continue to honor commitments on bringing back refugees from the camps in Bangladesh.
Will continue working on the repatriation of the displaced people who are now in Bangladesh, according to the bilateral agreement between the two countries and our policy.
Joining us from Yangon is Aung Kyaw Moe, a Rohingya human rights activist. Aung Kyaw, thanks for being with us today. Let me ask you, how has the coup impacted the Rohingya so far in Myanmar?
Thank you for having me here. And of course, it's too early to say what is the impact toward the Rohingya of the coup. But we could see already that there is a political priority agenda that the commander-in-chief who commanded this coup was saying the early repatriations of the Rohingya is a priority for the country. And I think also at the given time, the political landscape in Myanmar suggests Rohingya should be participating in the political movement in a more organized way that they have never been in the last few decades. And from an accepting perspective, I think the Rohingya, this is a given opportunity for them to show they're part of country, and we are going to be doing individually or as a community to ensure this country is in the right path with the democratization process. And we have been in the past in history that Rohingya people always has been in the history of Myanmar with the cabinet. In every cabinet that exists in Myanmar, Rohingya were there. In every parliament that exists in Myanmar, we were there. Every revolution that exists in Myanmar, we were there. And today we are going to be there. So I think that's supposed to be the thing for the Rohingya people, despite their NLD government. We are out there when they were in power to prevent the military from preventing them or standing as a firewall for international court of justice.
Aung Kyaw, the fact that there have been protesters, mainly young protesters, on the streets of cities like Yangon, carrying signs in which they are expressing regret for what happened to the Rohingya in the past, what does this say to you? Does that mean that there's more awareness of the plight of the Rohingya now in Myanmar?
Well, the battle is not between the NLD and the military. The battle is between the public, larger public of Myanmar and the democracy itself, the military. So I think we need to be able to distinguish. This is not a war that we're in between the military or the NLD. It is a war between the public, where the power of source exists in a democratic society. And I think it's like the example that you have given, that the regret what happened to the Rohingya is still very small number, and there should be quite a lot of people out there regretting like what happened to Rohingya people in the past. And the common enemy is not really Rohingya, It's military itself who committed these atrocities and things like that. And at the same time, I think Rohingya people should be able to express themselves and position them politically to be part of this country and to be participating in any means they can to be contributing to this democratization process. And the more importantly, I think the Generation Z who are demonstrating on the street are not claiming only for a democracy under 2008 constitution. They're asking to abolish 2008 constitutions that has a lot of controversial articles and chapter around. And that's meant that we are going to be rewriting the history of the democratic transitions. And it is important that Rohingya people participate in this process from very early stage, that either we are winner as a civilian against the military, or we are loser. The history will remain. So it is a given political opportunity for Rohingya people. Of course, the risk is high for Rohingya people compared to any other ethnic group in the country, because we are already at risk by default, being human being here.
Aung Kyaw Moe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, let's bring in our guests in Bangkok. Debbie Stothard is founder and coordinator of the ALTSEAN-Burma network. In London, Ronan Lee is a visiting scholar at Queen Mary University of London's International State Crime Initiative. And in Vancouver, Yasmin Ullah is president of the Rohingya Human Rights Network. A warm welcome to you all. Yasmin, let me start with you today. The Rohingya are one of the most persecuted minorities in the world. How concerned are you that they could become even more vulnerable, both inside and outside of Myanmar, as a result of the coup?
It is really, really worrisome, especially because the General Min Aung Hlaing actually appeared on a state TV just a few days ago, and he was actually mentioning the attempts that he's going to make in order to repatriate Rohingya back from Bangladesh. And he's looking forward to working bilaterally with the country in order to bring people back. But there isn't really any details that were given, and I believe that this is to do with easing off some of the international pressure that he's feeling, some of the heat that he's feeling from staging the coup. And if the international community actually falls into that trap, there's a high chance that there might be something really, really tragic that's about to happen. And it's not just Rohingya that will have to brace for that effect. It will probably be something that everyone in the country will also feel.
Debbie, I want to speak with you about something specific that Yasmin just mentioned, and that's the repatriation agreement between Myanmar and Bangladesh. This is an agreement that's long been in the planning phases and that has never happened. In fact, I was in the camps in Cox's Bazar in November 2018 at one time when they thought it was going to happen. It didn't happen then because there was so much concern about Rohingya being able to safely return to Myanmar. There not being a mechanism in place to guarantee their safety once they got back there. Do you believe that we could see this type of repatriation agreement going forward, or do you think it's complicated because of the coup?
I think the coup is going to make it simpler. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, the head of the junta, is trying to stave off international pressure by promising to implement the repatriation agreement. The problem is there will be no guarantees of safety for the Rohingya who are returning. There will be no guarantees they will get their homes back, and there will definitely be no guarantees that they'll get their citizenship back. Basically, they're going to be put into another spiral of repatriation and expulsion under this military regime.
Ronan, there was a case brought by the Gambia to the International Court of Justice accusing Myanmar's military of perpetrating a genocide against the Rohingya in 2017. What are the ramifications of the coup on that? Is that going to delay the possibility of justice even further?
Well, the case will continue. The case has been made already at the ICJ. There's been presentations made to the judges there, and the expectation, the Gambia's already, the ICJ has already issued provisional measures in the favour of the Gambia's case, so instructing the state of Myanmar not to continue committing genocide against the Rohingya. I think, though, the coup complicates matters because it will be somewhat uncertain whether or not the statements that were made by Aung San Suu Kyi to the ICJ and the assurances that she gave to the ICJ that there was, central to Myanmar's case was that there were sufficient justice measures in place within Myanmar. Well, those assurances really now cannot stand. It's very clear that there are not appropriate justice measures in place within Myanmar, despite what has been said to the International Court of Justice. I think what we're seeing with Min Aung Hlaing and Myanmar's military regards the Rohingya is the continuation of a long pattern. They use the Rohingya when they feel that there's a political need. He needs to present a business as usual, efficient business as usual model to the outside world. He's desperate not to be portrayed as having thrown Myanmar into chaos, which he has. And that's why he indicated to Myanmar's neighbours, Bangladesh, and indicated to China that he was prepared to continue with the repatriation. But that will bring no joy to Rohingya. They'll be very nervous about any repatriation that is undertaken under the military's control.
Yasmin, one of the more remarkable things that I have seen in the past week or so playing out on social media platforms is this outpouring by young activists and young protesters in Myanmar who are posting things saying that they regret what happened to the Rohingya, saying that they were brainwashed by the military, that they didn't realize what had been going on, that they're very sorry, and now that they are pledging their support to the Rohingya going forward. I want to ask you, because I know you've interacted with some of these people on platforms like Twitter, as a Rohingya human rights defender, as an activist, how does it make you feel seeing that?
It actually fills me with a lot of hopes. In no way am I trying to be naive in the sense that we have seen what the apathy of the general public can do. But within the context of what has happened and my work with Debbie, actually, with the project that we're working on called Bridges Myanmar, I've seen the same sense of sort of shift in the mindset in their views in terms of, who Rohingya are and our existence as a people in general. There is a lot of changes that are coming, and I can feel that the sincerity, the regret, and the want to change the country for the better is truly there. But the conditions and the situations, the violence and the restrictions and the suppression of the military is not allowing that, and these are the generations of people who have been socialized to hate and to feel the difference, to actually highlight all of the things that are going wrong, and they've been suppressed for so long, but they're now starting to see that there is a common enemy, there is a common threat of the perpetrators, and they're really wanting the country to actually become a little bit restructured in a way that they could truly look forward to their future not being under the control of the military. So that is really hopeful for all of us, actually, not just for the Rohingya, but for the ethnic communities as well.
Debbie, I saw you nodding to a lot of what Yasmin was saying, so it looked like you wanted to jump in. I will give you the opportunity. I also wanted to ask you what you think about what's going on. Do you think, from your perspective, that there is a kind of a reckoning going on right now?
Well, of course, I'm going to agree with everything that Yasmin says, because I'm a huge fan, a huge supporter of her. And all the young Rohingya women activists who are such kick-ass feminists, going out there and putting themselves out and having these very meaningful personal dialogues with diverse activists and young people from Burma, Myanmar. And this is what we're seeing. A lot of the leaders of the anti-coup movement were young activists who actually stood against the Rohingya genocide. They stood on the side of the Rohingya and called out the military for their atrocity crimes, not only against Rohingya, but against other ethnic nationalities. Now, these young people are leading this movement, and what they bring with them is increased credibility and their ability to influence public attitudes. And so public opinion is shifting, and this is creating space for a lot of people to push for a substantive, inclusive democracy. The status quo is no longer acceptable. People recognize that this divide and rule strategy of successive regimes is what is going to make the country and the society constantly vulnerable to coups and power seizures. So I think this is also not just a wake-up call in the human rights movements of Myanmar, but also a point in time that they recognize that it's time to shift the way they do human rights and democracy work.
Ronan, in your book, you call on Myanmar's young people and the Rohingya to embrace each other as allies. Do you think we are starting to see that happen, and are we going to see more of it?
I certainly hope we will see much, much more. Myanmar is a very young country. 70% of the people in Myanmar weren't even born when Aung San Suu Kyi first entered politics in 1988. But young people have been a long way away from political power in Myanmar. We're seeing that change with these protests. And we're seeing young people presenting a much more mature view about the sort of democracy that they want, a far more inclusive view. I think we should be sober and we should be realistic, but I think there's lots of reasons to be genuinely optimistic about the opportunities moving forward. But I think we need to recognise that there'll be hard work to be done by the leadership of the Rohingya and by young political leaders as well. There's a lot of work to do in Myanmar. Myanmar is a country that has struggled to emerge from 6 decades of military rule. There's now been another coup. It will take real efforts to roll back the sort of political narratives that the military has presented about groups like the Rohingya and about other ethnic minorities too. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yasmin, there has been so much international condemnation about the military coup. Do you think the fact that the military, the Tatmadaw, is under more scrutiny by the international community right now is going to lead to more focus on the plight of the Rohingya? And do you think you would see more countries going forward designating the atrocities that were committed against the Rohingya as a genocide?
I would surely hope so. I would surely hope that this would be a catalyst to a lot of the stagnation that we've been feeling. The often what was told to me when I engage on various different levels with various governments is that because there was an appearance of democratic transition with the NLD being in power, there was a little bit less inclination of all of these state governments to actually jump in or to actually get involved in scrutinizing the sort of human rights violations and various different terrible situations that were ongoing within the country. Now it sort of is a manifestation of that. The compromise that the NLD has towards the military, and it manifests in this way a very, very tragic situation where the entire country is now under siege. I surely hope that the economic incentives that the military has been pursuing will become something that the international community will sort of look at and try to steer clear of, and hopefully that the military will face a lot more retaliation from the international community, and that it will slowly ease off and be pushed out of the power. I know that that's a long ways away, but we're very hopeful that, with the plight of the Rohingya, it can be woven into, the larger structure of the abuse of power that the military has enjoyed for so long, and the culture of impunity that is ridden and infested within the society of Myanmar, and that we can actually do some little bit of revamping, and that knowing that the NLD will not be the silver bullet of the democratic movement.
Debbie, one of the other things that's really striking on social media right now is there's a lot of posts by Rohingya refugees in the camps in Bangladesh, and they are making the three-finger salute. They are showing their solidarity with protesters in Myanmar. Here's a population that was so brutalized by Myanmar's military. They are so marginalized and so vulnerable, and yet they are standing in solidarity with protesters in Myanmar. What does that say to you?
It says to me that the Rohingya in those camps, all the Rohingya have been displaced and expelled and subjected to genocidal violence by the Burmese military. They still feel they're very much part of Myanmar, and they feel a kinship with the people, with all communities there, even though they have been rejected by them. I think that is a generosity of spirit and a form of solidarity which mustn't be ignored and must not be forgotten.
Ronan, the fact that the Myanmar military stands accused of genocidal actions against the Rohingya for these atrocities that were committed in 2017, atrocities that the UN labeled a textbook example of ethnic cleansing. Is that, from your vantage point, factoring into their decision-making when it comes to what their response is going to be going forward to the protests?
I think it's clear that the military's attitude towards groups like the Rohingya is that they see them as things to be used for political advantage. So I think that what you'll see from the military is that if they think there's some political advantage to making a particular statement about repatriation or not repatriation, that's what they'll do. I think, though, what's very clear from these protests is that Myanmar's compromised constitutional system that granted the military so much power, it just did not work. And we simply cannot allow the country to go back to that. I mean, that's why there's protesters on the streets in such large numbers. They don't want the compromised political system that grants the military ongoing power. I mean, when the military's got more power in Myanmar, that's always bad news for groups like the Rohingya. But moving forward, there's a real opportunity to finally rid Myanmar of a powerful political military.
Yasmin, we only have about a minute and a half left. I just want to ask you quickly, how dire does the situation remain for the 600,000 or so Rohingya who are still in Rakhine State in Myanmar?
Extremely dire. People still don't have access to their basic needs. They still can't, they still don't have the rights to movement, don't have the rights to access, healthcare, education. Everything sort of remained the same. Although, right now there is a restoration of the internet by the military in order to appease the general public, in order to, support and endorse the coup. But I genuinely hope that what happened to the Rohingya does not happen to anyone else. And this is why I truly, truly urge the international community to not take the eyes off of the situation that's happening within Myanmar.
All right, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to leave the discussion there. Thank you so much to all of our guests, Debbie Stothard, Ronan Lee, and Yasmin Ullah. And thank you, too, for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Mohammed Jamjoom, and the whole team here, bye for now.